The first further example of successful higher academic enterprise was originally known as Networking Northwest. In Networking Northwest, 5 of the engaged universities from the northwest of England got together to develop a balanced learning approach to enrol, engage and empower 150 local small businesses in innovation for wealth creation. Small businesses normally hate any forms of training and rarely use it. Until this project, many governments throughout Europe were unclear of how to enable such businesses to successfully learn to become more creative for wealth creation. Network Northwest developed a unique approach which included a balance of social action learning, coaching and e-learning. With this approach, these small enterprises became highly innovative, their productivity improved and their profit margins grew as a result. The approach also went down extremely well with the small businesses themselves, who felt, for the first time in their lives, that they had really learned something of real value to their own progress. And indeed, 130 of the initial 150 companies starting the balanced learning approach continued with it for the entire year it was offered to them. The approach we adopted is also a form of virtuous knowledge sharing, where the small businesses bounce ideas off each other and their academic facilitators for a real benefit to them both. Because of this way of learning, the small businesses nicknamed the approach Bouncing Higher, and as a result, many of them developed more profound management for their companies, became entrepreneurial leaders in their own right, and often very quickly developed innovative new products and processes for their own organisation. The academic facilitators, who also acted as coaches to the programme, knew when to intervene and when to let the managers bounce ideas off each other without their support. So a group of small businesses who had hardly ever been involved in training before began to learn new ways of working without them even recognising they were actually learning. 2 years after the learning support ceased because of a lack of funding, many of these social action learning groups still meet under their own self-management to continue to bounce ideas off each other. Furthermore, 2 of the original academics supporting this process liked this different way of learning so much that they gave up their university jobs to continue this much-needed approach as private learning providers. An independent evaluation of the whole learning process was undertaken by Leeds University, and this revealed a 24% increase in the annual gross value added performance of the 130 companies under the study. Gross value added is one of the government's single most important metrics for assessing company productivity, and by British training standards, a 24% growth is a significant increase in GVA for such a short learning period. The evaluation also showed how much this approach was appreciated by the SMEs themselves, and also points to important self-coaching the SME members themselves gave to each other as they deeply and helpfully engaged with each other's problems and issues. Their sharing of what turned out to be common problems also gave them confidence that they were not alone in the problems that they faced. After each action learning session, SME managers left the meeting with new actions to implement and then evaluate. The actions were typically based on the best recommendations of their peers. The manager's aim was to learn from these improved actions and then report back to their peers at the next social action learning meeting. Although gross value added is the metric of progress chosen by the government, I prefer other measures of success. So the fact that many of these small enterprise managers continue to seek this coaching process from their academic facilitators is a key measure of success to me. A further rewarding performance indicator to me is the fact that 130 of the original 150 SMEs who started this new learning approach turned up for a celebratory event put on by our university to demonstrate to the Regional Development Agency how valuable the process was for them. Furthermore, my own university construction school, 6 rated in the research assessment exercise, has now adopted this learning approach in a large scale for much of its own continuous professional development to the construction industry. Finally, the Regional Development Agency has also begun to award the region's small businesses vouchers to redeem at universities of their choice who are offering learning such as Bouncing Higher that is so valuable to them. So a fully empowering learning process had been developed for a much disadvantaged group and is now being adopted more regularly across the UK. The second example I want to describe was developed by a university school of sociology. It was initiated by a director of a major housing association, a person external to the university. He'd recognised the needs disadvantaged and poor communities had with accessing personal finance, especially from the major lending banks. Such banks caused this reduction in banking access to poor areas, flight to quality. I prefer to call it flight from poverty. So many such banks have now closed their banking operations in low-income areas, several of which were in my own city of Salford, that now almost 3 million of UK citizens are without a bank account. And this makes them easy prey to loan sharks and moneylenders. This problem ties disadvantaged people more and more into the poverty trap. The external partner who brought this matter to our attention decided to explore the problem in more depth, and the university awarded him a young doctoral student to scope out the problem and source possible solutions. Through in-depth case studies on 3 disadvantaged communities, they worked together to specify an approach to solve the problem and suggest templates for local action to achieve real improvement. Now a dedicated university team has been set up to help local people overcome the issues and problems arising in the process of creating, setting up and managing their own community banks. 2 original banks were originally developed in Portsmouth and Salford as an early pilot. In these, finance issues turned out to be the minor problem. The real issues related to the setting up of the right social and managerial process to give local citizens the confidence even to try to develop, set up and run their banks. 13 community banks are now fully funded, controlled and led by local citizens, with several almost disowning their university heritage just as adolescents do their parents. However, some of the more advanced banks have now begun to work with the university again, this time to evaluate their present processes and to suggest improved ways of working. Furthermore, one of the banks has surpassed even its own expectations by starting up several new banks under its own initiatives. The 13 banks so far developed in urban areas now have 25 million on reserve for lending and a good debt recovery. And now, community banks are also now being developed in rural areas. Community Finance Solutions, the university unit developing this type of solution, is now spreading its actions into other areas, such as the development of community land trusts. My final example of Reach Out business relates to the 3 universities of Manchester who work together within their city in a programme known as Manchester Knowledge Capital. One of its many projects involves these universities collectively developing a marketing and information programme to convince their citizens to think seriously about sustainability in general and reducing their own personal carbon emissions in particular. By developing a marketing and publicity campaign called Manchester is My Planet, the good and the great from sport in the region have helped the universities secure the names of over 20,000 Mancunians willing to accept a stringent code of best sustainable action. We hope this in turn will drive them towards becoming carbon neutral in all they do, as is heralded by the Kyoto Agreement. Now the same university team is actively co-creating again in a related area to turn these actions and rhetoric into confirmed energy reduction practices by Manchester's citizens and communities. Like all the projects I've mentioned in this presentation, as well as others on my database, these 3 were initiated using virtuous knowledge sharing, were led by enterprising academics and co-created by a diverse team of talent.